When you have brothers, the opportunity to be offended is there all the time. I grew up in a family with 5, count them, 5 brothers. Do you want me to tell you about some of the things that happened as I was growing up? I was hung by a rope. I was stabbed with a fork. I was hit with a mallet. I was shot with a BB gun. The only reason we didn't kill each other is we didn't have good enough weapons.
Welcome to Church of the Rock from Winnipeg. Stay tuned to this week's thought-provoking message from Pastor Mark Hughes.
All right, we want to get right down to business today because today I'm starting a brand new series entitled A Brave New World. And I suspect there's lots of people in this room that would recognize that. That, of course, comes from the 1932 novel by Aldous Huxley. And this extraordinary novel written by an extraordinary man. Literary critics mostly consider Aldous Huxley a literary genius, and they consider Brave New World his masterpiece. And I've done quite a bit of reading because he's written hundreds of essays, dozens of books. And so the last few weeks I've been reading his stuff, and I've come to the same conclusion as the critics that he indeed was a brilliant man. And let me just give you a little brief, really short summary of Brave New World. The whole idea was this, that in the future, he predicted a future where people were going to be genetically engineered, socially indoctrinated, and pharmaceutically anesthetized. And if that's sounding vaguely familiar to our world, that's exactly where I'm going with this. I think that what he did was predicted the brave new world that we live in today. And it's not all going to be doom and gloom, although there definitely will be a little bit of that. But what I'm going to do every week is I'm going to take the concepts of Brave New World, and then I'm going to superimpose over that the biblical concepts, the precepts that make the church, the things that God gave us as the remedy to all that ails our world. And so as we look into Brave New World, I mean, there was these people that were encouraged in this futuristic world to pursue every carnal pleasure, to give in to every sexual impulse. But of course, the price they paid for it was dear because they lived without freedom, without individuality, and without privacy whatsoever. And even though this story was set in the year 2540, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to be pulling back the veil on our world. And I intend to show you that we are, in fact, living in Huxley's Brave New World. So here's what we want to do. We want to get back to the Brave New World for a moment and the world that Aldous Huxley imagined. And he imagined that people were no longer born. They were now genetically engineered. But what he did was he imagined these 5 classes of people, and he used the Greek alphabet to define them. And I'm going to throw it up on the screen to give you a visual. There was the alpha, beta, gamma, delta, and the epsilon. The alphas, they always wore gray. They were the intellectual class. They were bred that way. They were engineered that way. They were the rulers. They were intelligence. They were the leaders of that culture. Then there was the betas. The betas always wore the color mulberry. And you could very easily distinguish the classes because of what they were wearing. And they were not dumb people. They were smart. They were the scientists. They were the research and those sort of things. There was the gammas, and they were the service workers. They weren't necessarily the smartest, but they were very pleasant and easy to talk about because they were in the service industry and taking care of the needs of the other classes. Then there was the deltas. The deltas always wore khaki, and their thing was they were in the manufacturing world, and they were creating the things of this world. And finally, you had the epsilons. They were illiterate. They were basically incomprehensible, and they did the most absolute menial of things. They were basically servants or slaves in that culture. And so that was a little bit of a picture of who these people were. And of course, they were encouraged within this culture, within this system of several things, which are really important for where we're going on this. And the first thing was they were actually not just allowed to, but they were encouraged to discriminate between the castes and the different people. They were given to massive, massive consumerism and fulfilling every sort of physical need. The sexual promiscuity is something I'm not even going to begin to describe to you. Marriage was forbidden, monogamy was forbidden, and they were told to take as many partners as absolutely possible, as absolutely they could. There was no freedom of speech. There was incredible censorship. They were not allowed to talk. In particular, the forbidden topics were history and religion, because you all know where that is going to go. And then, of course, they were kept doped up on soma. That was the name of the drug. And that, of course, kept them compliant to the powers to be. So that was the world in which he created for these classes. Now, there was a group of people, actual people, naturally born people, that lived in the outlands, and they were called, catch this name, they were called the savages. And the savages, as I said, were naturally born, and they were actual people who lived messy and complex lives. And they believed in these, they were a dreadful people because they believed in things like marriage and monogamy and religion and freedom of thought and struggling with life and trying to enjoy life. And the protagonist of the story is a man named John. John's story is a bit complicated, so I don't want to get into the whole thing, but I'll just tell you this much. He was actually the biological son of one of the alphas. Kind of a little mistake that took place, if you catch my drift. And he was this biological offspring of one of these alphas, and they find him in the savage lands, and they bring him back to the brave new world. And he's highly intelligent because of where he comes from his father. And they're trying to assimilate him into this world. And he's looking at this world, a world that's meant to be a utopia. And of course, you quickly realize as you're reading this book that it's not about a utopia at all. It's a dystopian future. It's tragically broken. And the freedom that these people has come at this huge price of individuality, of freedom, of privacy. They have none of that. And when John looks at that, he doesn't want it. And they say, "Don't you want comfort?" And he says, "I don't want comfort. I want God. I want poetry. I want danger. I want freedom. I want goodness. I want sin." And then the man says to him, "You are claiming to be the right to be unhappy." He said, "All right, then I claim to be unhappy." Now, I want you to think about this for a moment. When he's saying he wants sin, that doesn't mean he wants to be sinful. The whole culture was sinful. What he wanted for, what he longed for, was a world that had right and wrong. What he longed for was a world that had creativity and freedom and the right to serve God and the right to be creative and have poetry. So that's a little bit of a snapshot of the brave new world. And then, of course, we're going to look each week, we're going to look at one aspect of this, and then I'm going to flip it on its head, and I'm going to show you the other side. Spend most of the time on the other side, I hope, telling you what the biblical imperative is and how we respond to the brave new world that I think we live in. So here's the thing we're going to talk about this week. One of the aspects of this novel was what I guess we would call it social stratification. That you have these 5 levels of castes, and people couldn't move between the castes. And whatever you were created or engineered to be, that's where you had to stay. And I know people say, "Well, we don't believe that. We don't have castes in our society. We don't have different classes of people. We're all equal. We're all created in the image of God, equal." Boy, I know that's true. You know that's true. That's not how our world functions, really. Do we think our world looks like that today? I mean, look at this. If you're a rock star, if you're a pop star, if you're a sports star, if you're a TV reality star, if you're a social, cultural influencer, you're treated like royalty today. Don't tell me people are treated equally in our world today. We are absolutely put people in classes, absolutely put people in castes. You know, The Guardian, the newspaper in the UK, did a survey of young people. You're going to love this. And they were teenagers, and they said, what do you want to do for a career? 1%, these were teenagers, average age was around 16. 1% said they wanted to be teachers. 4% said they wanted to be doctors. 54% said they wanted to be a celebrity. 50%. They said they didn't pick a path for that. They just wanted to be famous. What do you want to do for a career? Be famous. You probably all recognize this, that if everybody was famous, then nobody would be really famous. You kind of all get that, don't you? And so it's such a ridiculous notion. Unless you're a Kardashian, you can't be a celebrity for doing nothing, right? The rest of us have to work our way up there. But the fact that people want to be celebrities tells you how broken and how there's something so deeply wrong about our culture that elevates celebrities to such a level. And then, of course, the byproduct of that social stratification is discrimination. And I know people go, oh, Pastor Mark, if there is one culture that works against systemic racism and discrimination, it's our culture. Really? I hate to disappoint you, but I don't think that that's what our world looks like at all. You know what our world looks like to me? You tell me if I'm right or wrong. I see a world that is judgmental and critical and petty and super hypersensitive, and they're offended with everybody and everything. All you hear is how offended people are. And so even if you don't buy that we're living in Huxley's Brave New World, I'm going to take you on a little journey today, and I'm going to show you what Jesus says about our world today. Jesus actually made his own prediction about what the future was going to look like. This was 2,000 years. You tell me if it looks like our world today or not. And it's in Matthew chapter 24. I'm going to start at verse 10, and it says this. It says, there will be many that will be offended and betray one another, and they will hate one another. Then false prophets will rise up and deceive many, and because of lawlessness that will abound, the love of many will grow cold, but he who endures to the end shall be saved. Jesus, whether we like it or not, did not predict a future of grace and love and forgiveness. He predicted a future of hatred and offense. Isn't that what he said? Many will be offended. He said they will hate one another. The love of many will grow cold. And that's the world that we live in. And one of the things, and we'll get to this, is one of the things that he told us is not to be offended. How many times does the scripture tell you not to be offended? Actually, again and again and again. In 40 years of ministry, let me tell you the little secret that I've discovered. I've discovered that if you want to measure someone's spiritual maturity, one way you can do that is the ease in which someone is offended is probably a sign of their spiritual immaturity. People who are mature emotionally and spiritually are not easily offended. Those people that are always offended, always offended, always offended, let me tell you something. That is a mark of spiritual and emotional immaturity. Why? Because offense is completely and totally and utterly self-centered. It's about who you are. It's not really about what's going on or anybody else. And he tells us that we are going to live in a world where people are offended. And let me remind you of something that might surprise you. Do you know that offense, I'm going to call it the original sin. Now, of course, it wasn't the original sin in the garden. It wasn't the sin that took place when they ate of that fruit. But after the fall of man, offense was the very, very first sin was offense. And you will remember the story. It was the story of Cain. He got offended with his brother Abel, and he defriended him on Facebook. What did he do? He killed him. He was offended enough. Before he murdered him, which people think is the first sin after the fall, he was offended. Offense was the first sin. And he killed him. And Jesus comes along. Have you noticed how many times Jesus tells us not to be offended with our brother? Why does he keep using the word brother? Why isn't he using sister or friend? I'll tell you why. Have you grown up in a family with some brothers? If you had, Pastor Humphrey knows what I'm talking about. He had brothers. When you have brothers, the opportunity to be offended is there all the time. I grew up in a family with 5 brothers. Do you want me to tell you about some of the things that happened as I was growing up? I was hung by a rope. I was stabbed with a fork. I was hit with a mallet. I was shot with a BB gun. The only reason we didn't kill each other is we didn't have good enough weapons. So I want to show you a little verse here. This is such an important verse. It's out of Proverbs chapter 18, verse 19. And this is what it says. A brother offended is more unyielding than a strong city. Quarreling is like the bars of a castle. Now I'm wondering when you read that, if you can see how powerful offense is. A brother offended is like a strong city. Imagine a fortified city, the bars of a castle. That's the imagery. A prison is what he's saying. And see, I don't know if we recognize, we're so easy to become offended. We do it so often, and we're so used to people doing it. We're so used to doing it ourselves. We don't realize how deadly and damaging it is. Something fascinating for you to know, that in the New Testament, the word offense is the word scandalon in the Greek. And the word scandalon, where we get our English word scandalize or scandal from, same word, the root word. But in fact, do you know what the word scandalon was in Jesus' time, in Paul's time? It was actually an animal trap, was a scandalon. And you would open up, you all know how an animal trap works. You open up the jaws like this, the animal steps into it, and the jaws go and trap the animal. And so when you see that word offense, I want you to imagine that what that really means is you have stepped into a trap. See, who's the one that's taken captive? The person who offended or the person that was offended? It's actually the person who's offended that stepped into the trap. And we think that when we become offended with another person, we are somehow punishing them. You know what? 9 times out of 10, they don't even know you exist. They don't know. They hurt your feelings. You go on, and you're all mad, and I'm never going to forgive them. What's the point in holding a grudge if you don't hold it forever? Meanwhile, they're wandering through life, and you're the one who got caught. You're the one who got trapped. That's the power of offense. Let me tell you a little story about this. You're going to crack up. But this is a true story. So I'm driving to work one day, and I always grab a cup of coffee for the ride to work. And I'm sipping my coffee, and hopefully by the time I get here, I wake up. Sometimes that doesn't happen. But anyway, so I'm driving along. I got the cup of coffee. I'm sipping away. And I see this car right up in front of me in the next lane. And it's a big old, like 1976 Pontiac Parisienne, big old car, sunken shocks like this. I don't see any driver. All I see is a set of knuckles and a tuft of hair. So I know who's behind the wheel. There's some old guy. He's 5 foot 2 inches tall. He can't see over the steering wheel. Just a tuft of hair and some knuckles going down the road. The bigger, the older the old guy, the bigger the car. Have you ever noticed that? It's sort of a little inverse proportionship. So anyway, he's going down there, and I'm looking at who's driving that thing. Just then, without blinking, without any warning, he cuts right into my lane. So I cut to avoid him. I swerved to avoid him, which I managed to do. But guess what happened to my cup of coffee? Yeah, right all over my lap. It's all over my lap. And of course, I'm waving my fist at him. I'm screaming in pain. I'm doing all those things. And he's just sort of meandering down the road, minding his own business. So by the time I get to work, I got this big wet spot all over my crotch, right? And so I walk in, so I have to tell the story to everybody. Because I'm walking, and everybody's going to think I peed my pants, which was a possibility considering the situation. But that's not what really happened, so I need to tell them, hey, it's just coffee. Yeah. So I'm walking down, and I'm telling the story about this old guy in the Pontiac Parisienne, how he cuts me off, and the coffee. And by the time I'm halfway down the hall, going to my office, I've told this story 3 times, and the story is improving with age. And the more I tell it, the more animated I'm getting, more ridiculous I'm getting, and the more frustrated I'm getting at the guy and how I have to go through the day with my wet crotch, and I'm going through like this, and all of a sudden I stopped for a moment, and I thought, what have I just done here? I have just allowed some guy who doesn't know I exist to determine what I'm going to do with the rest of my day. And that's what happens when we get offended. Do you think he knows who I am? Do you think he cares who I am? He's probably cut 4 more people off that day. That's what he does. He gets up early so he can do that in rush hour traffic where it's more fun. And he'll continue to do that until he runs into a cop car and they finally take his license away. That's how that story is going to end. He's not my problem. You're getting this, right? And so what happens with us is that we are the victims of offense. It's not the people that have set the trap for us, because it may have been unintentional. So I want to get back to our brave new world for a moment, because I don't think we're doing that well. Jesus said this will be a world that the love of many will grow cold and many will become offended. And you know what? The crying call, because we know what Jesus wants from us. He wants love, he wants forgiveness, he wants compassion, he wants mercy. Those are the things he wants for us. But that's not what the rallying cry of our world is. The rallying cry of our world is this word called tolerance. Isn't that what people want? Tolerance. You hear, well, you just need to tolerate one another. Well, let me throw three things up real quick on the screen so you can follow along with me. The first thing is this. You know that tolerance is not the highest human ideal? You know what tolerance means? It means I put up with you. That's tolerance. How would you like it if I showed up here on Sunday morning and I said, I just want you all to know from the very bottom of my heart that I tolerate you. And I just say that like just from the bottom of my heart, just so tolerate you. Thank you for coming. There's nothing really deep about that. And we find Jesus never, interestingly enough, never tells us once to tolerate one another, but he does tell us to fervently love and unconditionally love one another. He tells you to love your brother, to love your neighbor, to love your enemy. Who would that all include, by the way? Your brother, your neighbor, your enemy. There's not too many people left, is there? And that's what the higher ideal and the value of Scripture is. The second thing about tolerance that I don't think I want us to miss is this, is that our world's not very good at tolerance. They talk about tolerance. Are they good at it? No. You know what tolerance is for most people? It's a one-way street. Tolerance alone has no power to bring the world together. There's no power in tolerance. So maybe we could get there, and we could all we could all tolerate each other from the bottom of our hearts. And we could all get there. What would that actually do? What would that actually create? It wouldn't create anything. And when I look at our world today, when I zoom out the lens and I look at our world, I don't see our world coming together, unfortunately, at the moment. I think we can make a difference, I do, but I don't see our world coming together. What I see is a world that is degenerated into abject tribalism. You know what I mean by that? We've all become part of a tribe. Either our race, our culture, our religion, our gender, it doesn't matter what it is. We're all part of this tribe, and the only thing we can do is look at the world through our lens and how everything affects us. That's tribalism. And what it leads to is this thing called identity politics, where people want things and they fight for their own rights. And the only thing that really matters in this world is their rights. How does that unite people? How does that bring people together? So I want to show you a little video today that went viral a couple of years ago. And it's a video of Barack Obama. And he's no longer the president. The year's 2019. He's at his daughter's university. He's been asked to come. He goes. They're doing a little bit of a town hall. They get into the whole idea of cancel culture and social activism. And I'll tell you one thing before I show the clip about Barack Obama. I don't care what you think about him politically. That's neither here nor there. The one thing that he always embodied, and he was really good at, was empathy. And he always talked about that. Before he was elected, he said, my grandmother taught me the most important ethic that you can have is to empathize with another human being, to understand, put yourself in their shoes before you act. That's empathy. And he always embodied that. I think he always did a brilliant job with it. And I'm going to show this clip that went viral because I think it's so important for our culture and where we're at. So let's run that clip.
This idea of purity and you're never compromised and you're always politically woke and all that stuff, you should get over that quickly. The world is messy. There are ambiguities. But I do get a sense sometimes now among certain young people, and this is accelerated by social media, there is this sense sometimes of the way of me making change is to be as judgmental as possible about other people. And that's enough. Like if I tweet or hashtag about how you didn't do something right or used the wrong verb, or then I can sit back and feel pretty good about myself because, man, you see how woke I was? I called you out.
So that little video went viral. He said, look, that's not social activism. That's not going to get you very far. You got to do better than that. It went viral, and it still is. It's still millions of views on it. I think it's simple, but it's brilliant, and it's really what our world needs. But do you know that it hasn't helped? Our world hasn't changed. Probably everybody in this room would know Don Cherry. And Don Cherry was 39 years on Hockey Night in Canada. You gotta love Don Cherry, right? I mean, I just so miss him. How are us men gonna find our fashion cues without a Don Cherry on television? I mean, one fantastic outfit after another. The guy knew so much about fashion, he knew more than we'll ever know. And so, you know the story, 39 years on Hockey Night in Canada, Coach's Corner, and he made one statement where he apparently, presumably, referred to immigrants as you people. called them you people. And of course, what happened because of that one statement was that he was sacked and his 39-year career came to an end. Boom, just like that. Second person I want to talk about is Megyn Kelly. Megyn Kelly, I wasn't ever a fan of Don Cherry's, by the way. He was always a knucklehead, but at least he was interesting. Megyn Kelly, of course, was a news anchor. She gets her own show. She's on NBC for the first time. They're having this kind of innocuous conversation about Halloween, and she makes reference to the appropriateness of blackface on Halloween as a costume. She gets creamed on that point. She apologizes. She was sacked, and her career was over, just like that. And I'm not defending these people and what they did necessarily. I'm just asking this simple question. I want you to ask it. Who are these perfect people that never make mistakes that are judging them? That's what I want to know. And God help them when it becomes their turn to do something wrong, right? Which they will. I mean, I look at this, I think, I say stupid things every day. And I think, God help you. I'm sort of outspoken. I don't know if you've ever noticed that. And people are always offended at stuff, and I get the most ridiculous requests, people demanding that I publicly apologize for things. So recently I got one, and this woman demanded that I publicly apologize for insulting the disciples in the gospel, because I accidentally, sort of on purpose, referred to them as the 12 disasters instead of the 12 disciples. And do you think, let's just think this through in a logical sense, do you think the disciples are sitting up in heaven right now, offended and mad at Mark Hughes and saying, God, you better strike him dead. Look at him. He called us the disasters. I'm offended, Jesus. I don't know what you think Jesus thinks of me. I know what he thinks of me. He's up there laughing, 12 disasters. I wish I had thought of that. Yeah, that's a wow moment. It really is. But you get my point. So let me end with one final story. I'm going to circle back to Barack Obama for a moment. So Barack Obama stepped in at once, and I'll tell you the story. It's, I think, 2014, I think. He's the president of the United States. He's at a manufacturing plant, and he is talking to these workers in this plant, and he's saying, look, you can imagine him saying this, look, you don't need a 4-year degree to make a good living. You will make more money, I promise you, you will make more money with skilled trades and manufacturing than you will with something like art history. And then he realized what he had done, right? And he said, not that there's anything wrong with art history. I love art history. I don't need to get a bunch of emails on that. Well, how do you think that worked? Not very well. And immediately he started getting emails from people mad because he has insulted art history and I'm offended. And one of the letters he got was from a professor of art history at the University of Texas. And so this person sends him a letter, and Barack Obama, this is what he did. He sent this person a handwritten apology on the White House stationery, apologizing for his glib and insensitive remark. The professor went on Facebook and said, I'm so embarrassed and feel guilty that a small little mistake like that, and I wasted the President of the United States' time. And I thought, you know what? Sometimes we get it, don't we? Sometimes we get it. And I believe that we have the ability, people. I think that God has given us this amazing gift called grace, this amazing gift called forgiveness. And he has told us what? How many times have I told you this? How often do you have to forgive everybody? You forgive everybody all the time. Do you remember when Peter came to Jesus and said, Jesus, like, how many times do I have to forgive my brother? Like 7? And Jesus says, no, like 7 times 70. How many would that be? Quick, somebody do the math. 490. And if you're counting, you don't get it. You don't get it. It means forgive everybody all the time. And it is the answer for what ails us in this world, this powerful thing called forgiveness. You know why? Because to err is human, but to forgive is divine. Amen.
If you'd like a booklet to help you understand more about God's gift of forgiveness and reconciliation through Jesus Christ, please contact us, and we'd be happy to send you a free copy of the Book of Hope. visit our website at www.churchoftherock.ca. Thank you for watching, and God bless you.